Welcome. This is our Afterthoughts segment where we keep our guests around for some additional conversation after our program. Today with us we have Michael LeVert, Maine State economist, and Chuck Lawton, the chief economist with Planning Decisions, Inc. Thank you for sticking around, gentlemen. We had a quick but I think a really good session on our broadcast show that we aired, and I wanted to ask you some follow-up questions about the articles you're writing for Mainebiz. It's called Working Knowledge. It's the series of 6 articles that you're putting in for Mainebiz. And also to talk about some of those things that we didn't get to cover earlier in the area of energy and tourism, and where you're going to be, the kind of research you're going to be doing on those. First, let's back up a little bit about, we talked about pulp and paper and healthcare in particular. Those were 2 of the sectors that we talked about on the show that you've examined. And I was just fascinated by the healthcare one in particular, I think, and the growth that's happening, the potential growth. Well, no, it's not potential. There's actual growth that's happening in that sector right now. And then the potential, too. Michael, talk to us about that. What are the new areas that aren't traditional, I think, that you may see healthcare industry growing for Maine?
Right. Some of the things that we found in doing that piece was that there's a lot of companies that aren't in the traditional, what we consider the traditional area of healthcare. They're not brick-and-mortar hospitals, doctor offices. They're really in the information industry, and they take Health Dialogue and Athena Health are 2 of the big ones that we talk to. And there are some really smart programmers, statisticians, folks like that are poised to capitalize on the healthcare, the demand for healthcare, but also on the idea that we need to start reducing some of the costs in healthcare.
Okay, good. Chuck, did you want to?
Well, I think that is an opportunity for Maine, and going back to the reasons that we undertook the project in the first place is to look at what are the sorts of training, what can we do in Maine to create the skills that will make this place an attractive place for those businesses. And I was very intrigued with the CEO of Athena Health, who said that he could sell millions of CEOs on what Maine has.
And all you have to do is sit down with Jonathan Bush for a while, and he can sell anything to anybody. But yeah, it's great.
It's great, but that is a, you don't need to be PhD degree candidates. You can be articulate, you can be responsive, you can be empathetic, and you can provide help without being in the doctor's office to the doctors themselves in their getting their electronic medical records understood, getting their insurance claims paid.
Okay, but you talked about training, though, too. Clearly, and we're talking about going forward. How are we going to get this workforce ready? And it's also, maybe not tourism, but certainly pulp and paper. There's a shift that's happening there, and getting students re-engaged in that again, and having their guidance counselors make sure they know that pulp and paper is not a dirty word. That's great. It's clean, it's good, it's high-paying, and it's moving in a new direction. Possibly, and then also in the healthcare, are we going to be? Will the state invest in education to really train our workforce?
It isn't even so much an investment. It's like you need a new pulp and paper institute or something.
All right.
It's that we need a closer connection between educators and employers.
Ooh.
And that's where
I see educators don't understand it already all by themselves. They should go out and ask industry what.
I think that's one of the reasons we're doing the series.
Yeah, I've found that with a lot of the guests I've talked to too, and many times that keeps coming up, is if they would just make sure and come to the industry and let the industry drive the kind of education, because the things you're talking about from the inside, they know what's happening and they're making plans for changes. And the same for healthcare then too. I mean, that whole kind of tech, but it's technology training, right? That's the workforce we need. It's not health practitioners.
Right. On the healthcare side, it's a tough mix. You have to understand healthcare data and healthcare services, but you also have to be technologically savvy. What we heard with both healthcare and with paper was that there's Portland and Maine can be a draw to some people outside of the state as well, to bring talented, young, educated people to the state as well.
Right. That was the. Which company was? I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name of it now.
Health Dialogue said that, but also Verso Paper also.
Right.
So
okay, let's talk about that. That's one of the things you do talk about in the article, is the disparities or the differences between the regions of the state. So how are you going to fix that? How do we deal with it? I mean, that's a chronic issue. What are the employers out there saying about that? I mean,
I think Chinbro is a good example of that. In Old Town, I think that the consolidation around centers of activity. One of the things that I learned I didn't realize before is that the Hospital Association often gets calls from companies that are considering a location, what's the status of the hospital? If we're going to locate a business here, is there going to be a hospital nearby? And I think that much of the effort at regionalization in school systems, in county delivery of services, in municipal government, are going to be focused around those communities where there's a sufficient amount of infrastructure to be able to attract businesses to create the jobs. They're not going to be the thousands and thousands that Millinocket used to employ 8,000 people in the paper industry, but neither are they going to be spread evenly across the whole state. They're going to be focused on communities that get it and put it together.
Yeah, it's also, does it have to do with that kind of creating those fatter labor markets where if you're wanting to attract high quality, if I'm Jonathan Bush and I'm setting up the next Athena Health somewhere and I want to attract that high quality workforce there, is it going to be a fat enough labor market where I can comfortably come there and know that if that doesn't work, I can expand to others, or my spouse can get work there as well? Are those some of the issues that you're finding too?
Right, I think that's very clear.
Yeah.
And I think it's not just a question of unemployed people. I think it's a question of people who are underemployed, who have skills that can be transferred from something where they used to be working and aren't anymore, and could adapt if there was the education and the training available to bring them into the new industry.
And with healthcare, it's about being creative as well. We learned about telehealth, which is a way for rural hospitals so they don't have to employ every type of specialist and have every type of equipment that they may not be able to afford. They can use telehealth and have their patients diagnosed and treated and seen from remote areas, either in southern Maine, even Boston. So there's a real opportunity there to stay viable, stay profitable, stay in the region for a hospital, but not have to have such expensive outlays.
Do you see, does Maine have a competitive advantage in the sense that we have an affordable workforce? I mean, I'm trying to use the right words here. The politically correct, but you know, they work cheaper than they will in Massachusetts for sure. Now, some things it doesn't matter. I think in your article you talked about some of the healthcare cost, or it doesn't matter. You know, it's going to be the same. But some of those things, like if you're doing back office kinds of work or other IT kinds of things, is that a competitive advantage for us that we can be able to market to other employers to come to Maine?
I think it is. I think this is the controversy about outsourcing, and what level of activity can you send to China or India or overseas, and what level of activity is the skill and the immediacy such that we can be a middle ground. And I think Maine has a place there, again, with the right training.
It's interesting. We wouldn't become the new India, but we become the middle ground that stop before you go to India. You know, look at Maine first. You know, maybe we can supply some of that.
Or come after you've rejected India.
And that's the other thing that in your article, the employers, the insiders were talking about was that quality of workforce. I know we talk about it all the time, but when it's coming from their mouth, I believe it. You know, I believe it. I want to finish up this segment with tell us what do you think you're going to find in the other industries, in tourism, in energy? Just talk a little bit about where you're going with those two, the last segment, two articles that are coming.
Well, I think with tourism, we're going to be looking at businesses that have had success in moving the tourism season across all seasons and moving it inland. I think that's really the focus there. With energy, Chuck?
With energy, I just see it as an exciting time because there's such a flux of new technologies, new pressures, and new demands on the regulatory system. I mean, we've got everything, LNG terminals and wind and solar, and not that it's been proposed here, but even the President has just said that he's interested in nuclear power again. So that I see the competition among the different technologies as an issue that's, again, like in paper, it isn't like it used to be 30 years ago, and that's really what we want to shed some light on. Yeah,
and interesting, as we move into that next segment, both of those, the tourism and the energy, they're also, that quality of place issue gets in there as well. I don't know if it's all of ours, but the quality of place issue in terms of environmental issues, conservation. Clearly we're hearing, you know, wind energy and turbines, that's great, but then you have a whole other group, smaller group, but vocal group, that's saying, wait a minute, let's look at this, you know. And the same is true with kind of moving western and northern for more tourism too. How do we use these great resources, but use them wisely? So, yeah, those are going to be tricky issues, but ones that we'll have to deal with. Okay, great. I'm going to stop it there. Thank you both for coming again. This is great, and encourage.
Thanks
a lot.
Thank you.
That's all. Thank you.